G'day guys, in today's video, I'm going to break down some of the best suburbs in Brisbane for 2024. Now, I've just done a massive amount of the hard work for you guys going through over 400 suburbs in Brisbane. I'm super excited about this video and bringing you 5 of the best and most undervalued suburbs in the city of Brisbane for the coming year. Not only do these suburbs have incredibly low vacancy rates and great average household incomes, but statistically speaking, they could be undervalued by as much as 30 to 70% right now, according to Australia's leading analysts. Now, traditionally, in every single capital city in Australia, what happens is prices generally go up first on the high-quality blue-chip beachside suburbs, then they go up in the inner-city waterfront suburbs, then the inner-city and middle ring, so suburbs within sort of 5 to 10 Ks, and then that growth starts rippling out. Now, what I love about growing up in Sydney and then moving into Queensland is I've seen this happen time and time again in Sydney, where suburbs sort of 20 Ks from the CBD like Goodner get completely overlooked, or that's Goodner, that's not a great place to live, that's one of those sorts of suburbs. And then all of a sudden, the population continues to grow in the city, which according to the Australian Bureau of Stats, Southeast Queensland is going to be at 6 million people within about 25 years from today. Start going, shit, this is actually really cheap and really close to the city. And as a first-time buyer or as a family, I can actually get into an area with great schools, great infrastructure, well below the 600K mark. So what I love about Goodner, the same as every other suburb in Brisbane at the moment, is the vacancy rates are ridiculously low. That's 1/3 of 1% right now. Incomes are okay. Percentages of renters, like I said, is a little bit higher than where I'd like it to be. I'd like it to be sub 35, but there has been a whole bunch of new land released in Goodner with new houses built in the last 15 years. And like any estate in Australia, the developers will tell you it's an owner-occupied estate, which is absolute BS. Basically, the developers just want to sell as much of their stuff as quickly as they can through property markets to investors all over Australia and the world. So when they build the land and build the first houses, it's always sold to investors, which in Goodner's case is making the percentage of renters looking much higher than it will be in another 10 to 15 years. And in 10 to 15 years, those investors will move those properties on, and first time, second time families will move into the area, and this number will come back below the 35% mark, which I've seen happen all over Australia. Very, very close to the city, 20 Ks. Because of that, it is phenomenally undervalued. You know, I know suburbs within the same range, 20 Ks from the city on the north side or the southern side, where houses could be between 200 and 500K more expensive right now. There's quite a bit of heat out there at the moment that's not being reflected in the DSR scores. In fact, it's gone from nobody looking at this area or part of the city in 2022 to between 10 to 60 groups rocking up to open homes at the moment in the market. So I'd say that DSR score will steadily increase. Right now, we're coming off the back of many months in a row of pretty positive sentiment. I think we're heading, according to KPMG, the ABC and SBS at the moment, for somewhere between about a 10 to maybe even 50% growth rate across Australia's capital cities in the next 12 months or so, based on their reports at the moment that are coming out. Now, as always, these average house prices don't tell the full story. In reality, you're looking at 500K to 600K to get into the area. But what's also cool is when you take out units, townhouses, and land, the average weekly rents are much better for the household. So between $450 and $500 a week for the average property in the area. But love this suburb. Again, think it's most people in Brisbane living with a blinder on. I think there's great potential there over the medium to longer term for capital growth, great cash flow, and very, very high quality, low maintenance, tenant ready properties available in this area right now. Now, another one of the suburbs that I love is on the northern beaches of Brisbane, around about 24 Ks to the city. Now, I will say that I personally own property in this suburb. I still think it's got incredible upside over the next 15 years. What I like about Clontarf is it's a beachside suburb going through monster gentrification at the moment, and has a really nice established private golf course in the area. Now, like always, vacancy rates are extremely below and well below 2%. Incomes are on the rise. When you look back at the previous census, They're jumping by about 20 to 25% every single census at the moment. Again, I know a lot of people moving into the area that are bulldozing homes that earn between $200,000 and $300,000 per year at the moment. Percentages of renters is changing rapidly. So this used to have a much, much higher percentage of renters when I started to buy it for myself and clients about 8 to 9 years ago. But what we're seeing now is a transition to many more mums and dads living in the area. Also got an incredible primary school, which is the Grace Lutheran Primary School there. My wife went to the high school, which is one of the top high schools in North Brisbane, close to the city, close to the beach. So we're looking at like a future Manly or Cronulla Beach type vibe. Although there's not the beautiful breaking waves that there is in Sydney, there's still really, really good deep water access for boats, with Moreton Bay just across the road as well. 10-year growth rates have been quite solid, as you'd expect for a quality blue chip beachside area. But I think these numbers could be skewed because there's so many beautiful properties that are being resold down the line there at the moment, particularly the ones that have been knocked over and rebuilt. I think it may have skewed the data a little bit in the area. The DSR scores are extremely low at the moment, with some demand but soft demand. Other parts of Brisbane where houses sell for below 600K are like fire right now. But these particular parts of the city on the beaches haven't quite caught that flame yet, and therefore represent great buying. Average house prices range massively like some of these other suburbs. At the moment online it's saying 745K, but I honestly think that's an absolute shitbox, and it's taking into account the units and the townhouses in the area. So a more realistic entry point is 800K to $1 million. The type of property that I actually owned personally in the suburb was a vacant piece of land that I subdivided. I sold one side. I shouldn't have done so. It was a massive mistake. And I kept one side. So what I built personally was like a brand new dual income with a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom home on one side that's renting for $600 a week right now. Single story with a 2-bedroom granny flat on the other side that's renting for $420 per week right now. So between the rent return, the tax benefits I'm receiving through my accountant on that particular property, it's been an incredible return on investment. In terms of where you enter for these types of suburbs, right now you could pick off a townhouse close to the beach in a small complex. You could get yourself a development site or a knockdown site for the future. You could buy a house and build a granny flat on the back, which at the time of recording this video is currently legal in Queensland. But obviously in the future, if you're watching this video, it may or may not be. Or you could just get yourself a renovator or a really, really high quality home. There's so much variety in this area, and having a drive through the area, you'll know what I mean. Now, one of my favorite and what I believe is one of the most undervalued suburbs in Brisbane CBD at the moment is Rina Hills, just 10 kilometres from the CBD. Now, what I love about this suburb is if you look a couple of kilometres closer in the likes of Kedron or Wable Heights, we used to be able to buy property there for clients for around about that 6 to 700K mark. Now those same properties are worth $1.5 to $2 million. But this beautiful little neighbouring suburb of Rina Hills, sitting just 10K from the city, has gone through some price growth, but nowhere near what it potentially can compared to its neighbouring suburbs. Now, vacancy rates are extremely low. Incomes, obviously that close to the CBD, are extremely high. There's a whole lot of quality schools and quality infrastructure in the area as well. But what I love about this particular part of the inner city of Brisbane is the percentage of owner-occupiers is extremely high. You know, driving through this area for the last 9 years, I've seen it change so dramatically from like a pretty average little part of the city with some nice houses and some okay ones to a place where literally every fourth home at the moment is being renovated. So many places are being knocked down and rebuilt, and money is just moving into the area because it's not just close to the CBD, but it feels so far removed in terms of the lifestyle. Beautiful green, bushy, a whole bunch of national parks around it. And what I love about it is the mountains of Brisbane cap it in that northwestern corridor so that no future development can occur over the top of that. Now, the 10-year growth rates have been okay. The DSR scores look exceptional right now. And entry-level buying in Rina Hills starts at about 800K, which if you have a look at the sold section on realestate.com, there's homes selling all the way up to the 1.3 to $1.5 million mark at the moment. But in reality, when you compare it to neighbouring suburbs, it's cents in the dollar still at the moment. And I think because of that, the rising tide is going to continue to lift this boat in a big way between now and the Olympic Games. Now, this next suburb, Marsden, is in the southern side of Brisbane's CBD and is around about 25 k's from the city. Now, this part of Brisbane is very, very similar to the northwest of Sydney or the Sutherland Shire in Sydney, or sort of the northeastern parts of Melbourne. Now, what I love about Marsden is it had a really, really bad historical brand name, and that's put a whole lot of investors and owner-occupiers off the area for the last 15 years. Like all of these areas close to the city of Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, etc., these areas that are often overlooked end up becoming incredible investments because sooner or later, like is happening right now, people realise they're super, super close to the CBD. They're very close to access to main roads and transport like trains, and they actually have quite good school districts, and the types of people that used to live there when the house prices were $300K and the rents were $250 a week can no longer afford to be there when the house prices are $550 to $600K and the rents are above $500 a week. So what we're seeing in this part of the city, which is South Brisbane, is a major washing of the tide at the moment, like we've seen in Sydney and Melbourne in the past. Now, it's not going to be a perfect area until the average house price gets to between $700 and $800K and the average household income jumps to sort of that $75K to $100K per year, but it's well on its way to that at the moment. So the vacancy rates are very, very low. Incomes have jumped massively in the last two census. The percentage of renters is still extremely high. There was a high number of investors that bought this area in the last 15 years because it was so cheap. What I think is happening at the moment is a lot of people are selling out those investments because they're finally getting their money back, people that have been sitting in Brisbane for a long time. And we're mainly buying against owner-occupiers and first-home buyers that want to live there and raise their kids there because of the proximity to schools, transport, the CBD, and the Gold Coast is only 35 to 40 minutes down the road. Now, the 10-year growth rates have been very, very low compared to neighbouring suburbs. In fact, if you looked at a map of Brisbane, there's a main road that runs from the Gold Coast to the city called the M1. On one side of the highway, there's suburbs like Daisy Hill, Shayla Park, etc., that have literally doubled in value in the last 5 years. You look across the highway in the likes of the Marsdens and the Slacks Creek, and they haven't gone through anywhere near the same amount of growth in the same period of time, which I really, really like, especially because people can easily drive straight across the highway to 7 of the top 11 schools in South Brisbane on the other side of the road there. Now, the DSR is perfectly ripe for buying at the moment. Average house prices are realistically between 550 and 650K right now, depending on what you're after. The council is quite supportive for development. So if you talk to a town planner and the local council, you may be able to look at just a standard single income home, but with the right land size, frontage and dimensions on the block, you might be able to do something a bit more fun, like a house with a granny flat, a duplex, or even maybe a subdivision, subject to talking with your planners and the council and obviously finding the right builder. But areas like this, the thing I love about Brisbane right now is because we haven't gone through the crazy price growth that the likes of parts of Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, etc. have gone through in the last 10 to 15 years. Places with poor brand names like Marsden that have been forgotten about are still sort of got that little bit of a stigma to them. And because of that, like we've seen in so many parts of Sydney and Melbourne, we should see some pretty significant price growth in this area over the next 15 years. In fact, according to a recent article in the Australian Financial Review, where 7 analysts, including some of them from the major banks, looked at the average parts of Brisbane in the south here, where homes were selling for 600K. They're expecting by the Olympic Games, the house prices to go to somewhere between 900K and $1.1 to $1.2 million between now and the Olympic Games. Now, I personally can't see that happening. Who knows what the future holds? But that sort of information getting through the media, getting through the newspapers, getting online and getting through the investment community is going to have a positive upside for suburbs like this as it washes through over time. This next suburb, which is on the southeastern beaches of Brisbane called Alexandra Hills, is a little diamond mine. Now, this suburb sits in what's called the Redland Bay Council. Now, what I love about this suburb is the suburbs sitting directly in front of it on the beach have gone up significantly recently and have massive infrastructure, which I'll talk about in a moment, coming through shortly. But what I love is its neighbouring suburb, Ormiston, has one of the #1 schools in all of Brisbane, Ormiston College, at the moment. In fact, in 2021 and 2022, it was a top 5 school in Brisbane. And in 2023, 2024, it's going to remain a top 10 school. So that's sucking many of the migrants moving to Australia, as well as many of the people coming up from Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra since the start of COVID. Now, again, Alexandra Hills has an incredibly low vacancy rate, below 0.5%, which anything under 2% would be considered chronically undersupplied by SQM. The average household incomes relative to house prices are phenomenal, with the average household almost earning 100K per year at the moment. Very, very high percentage of owner-occupiers living in there, which is actually quite uncommon for a beachside suburb on the east coast of Australia. So I love that because people will continue to do what they're doing now, which is renovating, knocking down and adding value to their properties. What I also love is this beachside area is so close to the city, only 20 Ks to the CBD and about 35 minutes in the car. 10-year growth rates have been okay. DSR score is extremely low at the moment. So this means that not a huge amount of people know about this particular part of the city. Not a huge amount of people are focusing on it, which could give you a significant advantage when negotiating and when buying in the next 12 months. Average house price is in that 700 to 800K range. You can get stuff a little bit cheaper than that that requires a lot of work, or you could pay a bit more than that and get something that's absolutely beautiful. Typically, there's 2 types of properties in the suburb, not including townhouses and units. One of them being renovators, double-story Queenslanders. The other one being sort of the brick tile slab on ground stuff. But what I also love is it's extremely close to Cleveland. Cleveland's has a proposal for a $1.6 billion redevelopment of its foreshore at the moment, with luxury cafes, restaurants, accommodation, housing, and dining in the area. It's going to be an absolute game changer when it comes through for this area of Alexandra Hills, which will be straight up the road from it. Average weekly rents aren't bad. The properties that we buy in that sort of 750 to 850K range in the area are generally renting for $550 through to $700 a week. We've also supported some people at the moment to go buy a home in the area, clean that home a little bit up with their property manager and builder, and then build a granny flat out the back. So it can be an incredible way to get not just medium and long-term capital growth, but really strong cash flow based on the current town planning scheme in the area at the moment. Just want to say thank you so much today, guys, for listening to my content, for looking at my kooky, non-straight writing and pictures on the whiteboards. Now, for those of you who are seriously looking to buy an investment property in the next 12 months, I'd love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. Just jump over to www.pumpedonproperty.com, click that free strategy session button, then we can talk about where you are right now. We can talk about where you'd like to be longer term. We can share these suburbs as well as many more that look phenomenal in Brisbane in the next 12 months. And then you can take that information and go and absolutely smash it on your own, or potentially become one of the extremely small number of clients that we work with each month here at Pumped on Property. But either way, I wish you all the best on your journey to financial freedom and financial peace in your future.
Woo! That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting cool,
Spin.
bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. Look at that.
So nice, eh?
Oh.